The $12 trillion exposure, food, energy, and the middle corridor. Start with a harvest that missed its week. A combine sat idle on the edge of a field near Khorzum while the farmer stared at a message. Release postponed 72 hours. Wheat doesn't negotiate. Miss the soil's right field by a few days and grain shrivels, protein slides, and the elevator's price sheet puts you in the penalty column. That's not a spreadsheet error. It's a river saying no. Across the district, picks and shovels replaced pumps for a day, then two, then a buyer called from a rail spur asking why the tonnage was light. The answer was centimeters. Food rides those centimeters. Cotton demands steady duty cycles. Wheat asks for pulses that line up with root stages. A single dry week in June turns into a ginning line that runs short in October and a mill in Bursa that pays overtime to rework blends. A contract in Tashkent written in clean legalese now includes a meter ID at a specific gate. Miss that gauge's minimum for 5 days, and the buyer exercises the clause that cuts volumes and price. What nobody put on the brochure was that quality is water speaking through fiber strength and kernel weight. Energy wears the same dependence in steel and steam. Gas pipelines count on river-cooled compressor stations. Thermal plants count on intake temperatures that don't trigger fish kill limits. One hot August, a plant on the Zeravshan throttled output because the cooling loop ran sluggish in warm, low water. The grid filled the gap with diesel peakers, expensive noise that turned villages sleepless. The report called it a hydrology constraint. Workers called it the week the fans stopped. Hydro trades time for electrons. Reservoir head looks like comfort until evaporation skims your safety margin and silt steals a meter you assumed was permanent. Upstream, dispatchers are the evening peak and hold gates longer than the agreement likes. Downstream, pumps cough air at dawn. Power swaps that once read firm now carry footnotes tied to discharge at 2 stations most people can't pronounce. Invoices add a line for reservoir conditions. Nobody argues the physics. They argue the bill. Now track those pulses into the middle corridor. A week's shortfall on a river-fed terminal outside Kurik cascades into lighter barge drafts on the Caspian, delayed roll-ons at Aliat, and a Black Sea slot missed by 6 hours that turns into 6 days. A textile shipment aimed at Izmit arrives late. The buyer pushes your payment out a quarter. A container of spare parts bound for a mining line sits 2 berths back because the crane yard's cooling tower tripped and the union won't sweat through a heat advisory. Logistics doesn't call this drama. It calls it Tuesday when gauges blink. The corridor's promise always assumed water nodes would hum. In practice, every hinge point, port, yard, lock, intake listens to a river. When a drought advisory knocks Aktau's drafts down by 10 centimeters, operators shave stack heights, trains idle on sidings while manifests get reprinted, exporters pay the spread. Insurance underwriters update their loss models and ask for the hydrology dashboard credentials. If you can't show the page, they raise your premium before you finish the sentence. Here's where the number balloons. Food plus energy plus corridor flows, priced over a decade of capex and offtakes, equals exposure in the multi-trillion range. Not because one river sets global trade, but because a dozen small dependencies line up. A mill's procurement team hedges with extra stock, tying up cash. A power utility signs a backup gas contract it never wanted. A shipper pays for time charter flexibility. Each move shaves margin to buy certainty. Add the region's sovereigns, ports, pipelines, and grids, and the ledger reaches 12 zeros fast. It's not hype, it's cash pinned to gauges. Markets adapt in paperwork first. Offtakes introduce flex bands keyed to specific stations. Delivery windows float with drought triggers. Price curves include Central Asia hydrology basis. Banks write covenants that step interest if salinity at a drain exceeds thresholds for a month. Traders watch satellite pass imagery for reservoir glint and bid freight accordingly. A handful of centimeters decide whether a charterer exercises an option. Finance doesn't moralize, it quantifies. Meanwhile, manufacturers already feel it in throughput. A steel plant near Karabogas times quench cycles to river temperatures and pays a premium when intakes flirt with heat limits. A fertilizer line in Navoy slows ammonia output during a low-flow spell because cooling margins thin. Finished product misses a train window to Kars, sits under sun, and picks up a QA note that lowers the buyer's tolerance next quarter. Nobody blames climate in the memo. They write operational variance and move on. Unknown to most end customers, procurement teams turned amateur hydrologists. A food processor in Almaty added a column to its vendor scorecard, reliability under drought. A utilities board begins meetings with a slide of 4 gauges, not 4 fuel curves. A port authority ties executive bonuses to draft days maintained under heat. The story isn't doom, it's redesign. Then, because rivers also surprise, the corridor breathes in reverse. A wet spring flush drives salinity down, a rare cool summer grants reservoirs a reprieve, cranes catch up, spreads narrow, relief feels like competence. It is. It's weather being kind for a season. The exposure doesn't vanish in a rain, it waits. That's why the only real hedge is discipline written into things that move water and money. Live meters, auto triggers, drains that work, crops that forgive, intakes that don't pretend August behaves like May, and contracts that stop lying. Because the basin already set the speed limit, the corridor can either match it or pay for every time it tries to pass. Strategic emptiness too, why the map stayed thin. While contracts learned to breathe with gauges, the map kept a different rhythm. Space where you'd expect towns, silence where you'd expect protest. That wasn't an accident. Strategic emptiness near headworks and corridors turned out to be policy that solved 3 problems at once: approvals, security, and speed. Keep people thin where intakes sit and dams rise, and a permit moves faster than a petition. Fewer relocations, fewer kitchens to organize against a weir. Fewer eyes to film a midnight release. The doctrine evolved from an older logic. Soviet planners once drew belts of productive emptiness around big works, safety zones that doubled as control. After independence, the rationale shifted. Advisors called them buffers, flood envelopes, landslide setbacks. Sensible on paper, decisive in practice. A construction schedule breathes when it isn't dodging backyards. A corridor widens without lawsuits. The water wins time, the project wins silence. Governance learned to prefer clean lines over messy resilience. Put people in nodes where services can be stacked: hospital, school, market, substation, and the state can deliver, monitor, and message. Outside those nodes, leave pasture and scrub. In a drought, concentrate tankers, keep patrols simple, control rumors with 1 meeting instead of 20. In a flood, fewer evacuations, fewer buses on bad roads, fewer families to account for at a gate that may fail. Emptiness reads like prudence under hazard models and efficiency under budgets. Security loves the quiet too. A high dams approach road with no villages means fewer places for sabotage, fewer claims when checkpoints harden, fewer social escalations when a gate stays closed through a hard week. The same emptiness lets army convoys move without apology when a border flares. And in a basin where data is leverage, a sparse ring around headworks makes unwanted cameras rare. But emptiness carries a cost the ledger doesn't show. Opportunity clusters at junctions, rail, road, and river nodes, while hinterlands lose muscle. A child born in a buffer learns that power lives down the highway. Credit follows addresses, jobs follow badges, training follows unions. Meanwhile, resilience erodes where voices thin. Elders with headwater knowledge, the slope that slips after 3 hot days, the spring that recovers after 1 cold night, don't get a hearing because they don't get a seat. When a valve groans, the only witnesses are wind and dust. The paradox is sharpest at water's edge. Buffers keep settlements away from intakes, but they also blind the system to early warnings humans catch first. A farmer smells algae before a lab reports it. A child notices a bridge mark after school and tells a parent to hold planting 2 days. Replace those eyes with a camera on a mast and a monthly PDF, and you trade cheap attention for expensive surprises. Development repeats the pattern. A shiny logistics park blooms at a node with a ribbon and a headline. A clinic in the buffer closes, a teacher moves, a shop locks up. The corridor hums, the map thins. When drought hits, the node mobilizes, dashboards, meetings, thresholds. The buffer waits for a truck, and the truck waits for a phone call. Silence becomes policy's most dangerous success. There's a social psychology to emptiness that managers rarely name. People are easier to move later if they were never allowed to root. A family in a buffer learns not to plant trees that will outlive a permit. Houses stay modular. Rituals drift from riverbanks to parking lots. When relocation arrives, the grief is smaller by design, and so is the resistance. Stability is preserved by preventing attachment. Yet the basin's physics punishes overconfidence. Emptiness near headworks doesn't protect downstream capillaries. A canal starves a delta whether or not a buffer ringed its intake. A reservoir kept pristine by distance still loses a meter to wind. And when trust fails, the quiet areas become rumor factories. Every dry week is theft, every wet week a trick. Without communities embedded near the works, legitimacy has to be imported by press release. There's another path, slower and louder. Put small services back along the thin lines, co-op wells with public meters, microclinics tied to drought thresholds, schools that teach gauges as civics. Let buffers be smart, not hollow, seasonal grazing planned with spill risk, set back homes with buyout funds published in advance, community monitors paid to watch what machines miss. The map would stay thin where it must, but not mute. In a hotter, windier century, silence looks efficient until the false prosperity loop. Here's the mechanism nobody wants to admit out loud. In a hot week, you save a crop by pushing more water. The field looks rescued, the leaf curl eases, the inspector nods. Underfoot, a slower transaction starts. Over-irrigation lifts the shallow water table. Capillary rise pulls that water up through pores, bringing dissolved salts with it. The sun takes the water and leaves the salt. Root hairs meet a brine they can't name and begin to fail by millimeters. Drainage is the missing partner in every heroic season. Collectors silt, outfalls slump. The maintenance line in a budget loses to a ribbon cutting elsewhere. Without an exit, salt accumulates. Reuse turns efficient into corrosive. The same cubic meter that saved the cotton yesterday returns warmer and saltier today, then cycles again. Each pass concentrates. Each pass shrinks the margin between acceptable and fatal. Farmers learn to read the betrayal in small things. Soap won't lather in the courtyard. A white crust forms along a furrow's edge where water slows. Wheat heads look almost full from the road, then empty in the hand. Tomatoes glow and taste wrong. You throw more water because the supervisor visits next week, and a green field is a defense. The meter spins, the ledger applauds, physics keeps its own books. This is the false prosperity curve. First year after a new intake, yields jump. Inputs are fresh, soils flush, roots find air. Second year holds barely. Third year brings odd patches, sick corners, stubborn weeds, a strip along the tail end that refuses. Managers call variability, agronomists call warning. By year 5, the rescue budget, water, diesel, gypsum, eats the profit that the first bar chart promised you. Debt arrives disguised as optimization. Policy nudges the loop forward. Subsidies reward volume, not salinity balances. Area targets overpower drainage plans. Cheap water prices protect waste and punish care. Credit officers tour green, not drains. A farmer who cuts duty to save a soil horizon loses bonuses. A farmer who floods to pass inspection gets paid. Everyone sees the trap. Everyone rides it anyway. Meanwhile, drains demand the unglamorous work. Cleaning collectors, lowering water tables, managing outfalls so that salts leave the root zone and don't return to canals. It's expensive, it's constant, and it's invisible when it succeeds. When it fails, the bill shows up in kidneys and kitchens first, then in procurement lines, then in migration. You can't photograph a working drain. You can photograph a white field. In markets, salinity is a quiet discount. Gins mark fiber that breaks, mills blend to hide weakness, buyers write off-spec with a shrug and cut the price. Wheat deliveries fall under protein thresholds by a hair, bakers compensate with additives, exporters widen spreads. None of those lines say salt, they say quality variance. Salt wrote the variance. Engineers try the kit, laser leveling to slow tailing losses, surge irrigation to reduce ponding, drip lines that feed roots and spare soil. Each helps, none erase the budget. Without drains, drip becomes a slow salting. Without salinity targets, leveling makes uniform the spread of a problem. Without rules that tie quotas to salt export, the kit is theater. Here's the line that wins or loses a decade. You can't leach without a place for salts to go, and you can't afford leaching water unless allocations recognize drains as infrastructure equal to canals. Pay for salt removed, not just water delivered. Publish S-maps like yield maps. Put bonuses on blue fields and penalties on the glittering ones. Make the heroic act in a dry week the decision to skip a save and protect a soil's future, and then pay for that courage. A micro-story says the rest. A farmer near Dashaguz stands at the edge of a plot that fed his family for 30 years. He rubs soil between his fingers and grimaces. His son shows him a brochure, drip, filters, promise. They install, and the first season looks good. The second season tastes of metal. The third ends with a bank visit. The brochure didn't include a drain. The trap isn't inevitable. It's incentivized. Reverse the reward and patience starts to pay. Retire the worst pans, build drains before intakes, price water to value soil, not just stems. Write seasons into law, salinity bans, automatic leaching windows, audited exits. The curve bends slowly. False prosperity fades. Real resilience looks boring. That's how you know it's working. Data wars and the dashboard lie. Meters don't lie, people do, mostly by omission. In a canal office near Urgench, a clerk logs intake volumes from a panel that hasn't been audited in 3 years. The pump curves look fine because the gauge is upstream of a leaky turnout. The field still dries out by Wednesday. On paper, delivery meets quota. On the ground, a farmer buys diesel he didn't budget for and blames the wind. Meter illusions thrive where alignment doesn't. An intake reading tells you what entered a canal, not what reached a route. Pumps hum, screens clog, tailenders watch headenders irrigate twice. A district report shows water applied, while fields at the end switch crops mid-season. When a contract asks for liters per hectare, the spreadsheet smiles. Plants negotiate in millimeters. Upstream, there's an incentive to keep it fuzzy. A canal's reputation rides on reliability, a ministry's on efficiency gains. Move the meter to flatter the narrative and salvage the KPI. A dashboard turns green even if the village text thread says, "Bring drums Thursday." Meanwhile, agencies merge, split, and rename, but the calibration sticker on the flow meter still says 2018. Orbit doesn't care about memos. Satellites watch heat plumes and reflectance. Evapotranspiration models pick out thirsty blocks field by field. Reservoir glint tells you surface area by week. NDVI catches crop stress 2 irrigations before a complaint letter reaches an office. A trader with an API key sees a drought arriving in a salinity spike long before a committee meets. The clash gets loud in drought. Seasonal means look normal. The catastrophic weeks are what matter. A canal authority posts within historical bands. A community scientist points to stick marks on bridge piers that say 2 days late and a salt ring where tomatoes died. Procurement needs windows, not averages. A factory manager who ordered inputs around a median timeline calls it what it is, a lie by smoothing. Community data rises because everyone's tired of arguing with PDFs. Pump hour logs in a notebook, tanker receipts clipped to a wall, WhatsApp photos of gauges at 6 a.m., a co-op paints big numbers on a pier and streams them with a cheap camera. Kids chart them for homework. The upstream agency calls it populism. The insurer calls it corroboration. Capital splits in two. One camp believes corporate dashboards with animated gauges and perfect fonts. The other trusts mixed sources, satellite ET anomalies, third-party audits, and co-op streams. The money follows credibility. A fund lowers premiums where a basin publishes raw feeds and accepts audits. It raises them where every answer arrives as a quarterly slide deck that never admits a miss. Insurers and banks rewire documents. Hydrology triggers move from annex to headline. Hit a minimum flow at station X for 7 days. Shipment windows slide without penalty. Salinity at drain why breaches are banned. Offtake volumes flex automatically. Lawyers stop asking, "What did you intend?" and start asking, "What does the meter show?" The only argument becomes which meter. This is where the dashboard lie breaks. A glossy portal that shows deliveries met can't coexist with satellite ET that says no. A GIF of reservoir fullness means nothing if wind and heat skins off 5 centimeters nobody counted. A canal that hides tail-end shortfalls in system efficiency finds its rating clipped by a model someone ran on a laptop 5 time zones away. The fix is boring and hard. Align meters to outcomes. Put audited sensors at intakes, mid-reaches, and farm turnouts. Publish raw and derived numbers. Timestamp every change. Let anyone compare dashboard lines with peer marks and orbit data. Tie bonuses to agreement between sources, not just to green lights. If NDVI says stress and the canal says flow, the incentive is to find the leak, not the narrative. One more pivot. Teach hydrology as civics. Put gauges where teenagers can see them, deadlines where clerks can't hide them, and consequence where excuses used to sit. The basin doesn't need perfect data, it needs trusted data that moves valves. Because every day without it, someone trades a field for a tank, a schedule for a rumor, and a season for a screen that said all good while the soil glittered. Possible pressure valves, efficiency, crops, and managed retreat. Here's where it gets practical. You can't print water, but you can spend less of it to buy time. Hardware goes first. Line the worst leaking reaches, not the pretty stretches near the highway. Audit every turnout. Fix the head-end bloat that starves tail enders by midweek. Surge valves and gated pipes beat open furrows in a hot century. Laser leveling shrinks ponding, and night irrigation cuts the evaporation tax when the wind lies down. Drip and low-pressure sprinklers help, but only if the salt has somewhere to go. Pair them with drains, or you build a quiet brine factory at the root zone. Pressure regulation is a silent hero. Half the efficiency loss is overpressured pumps beating water into sand. Fit variable speed drives, train crews to read manometers, not just full-on. Leak hunts aren't a campaign, they're a habit. Pay districts for cubic meters saved at the farm gate, not delivered at the intake. Publish the savings and split the gain. Diesel spared, hours recovered, centimeters left in the river. But efficiency without agronomy is cosmetics. Crop choice is a water plan wearing boots. Retire cotton on the saltiest pans, put cereals and pulses where forgiveness matters. Move to shorter season cultivars that chase cool hours and avoid August's teeth. Seed earlier when melt advances. Shift sowing bands by microclimate, not district boundaries. Rotational fallowing isn't a failure if the fallow is strategic. Stagger it across subreaches so a canal can breathe without starving a town. Salt-tolerant lines aren't silver bullets, but they push thresholds. Barley where wheat falters, halophyte forages where alfalfa dies. Gypsum helps where sedicity locks soil. Organic matter buys porosity that salt can't easily conquer. Trial plots should sit at tail ends, not research stations. Pay farmers to risk the first season and keep the seeds that prove they can take a hot wind. Release rules need lungs. Write rules that breathe into law. Priority tiers that switch automatically under gauges. Drought triggers that ratchet flows to drinking water and baseline food. Then peel back exports without a midnight argument. Make minimum flows real. Audited meters and auto penalties that hurt. Tie canal openings to salinity bands in drains. If S climbs, the leaching window opens even when the schedule hates it. The basin will always prefer a valve that moves itself to a meeting that arrives too late. Aquifers aren't a piggy bank, they're a lifeline with rules. Cap withdrawals by basin, not by pump. Map salinity and right zones, what can be pulled where, and when you must replenish. Managed aquifer recharge can turn a flood into a bank deposit. Spread water across sandy fans after storms. Feed recharge basins off canal slack in May instead of dumping to a drain. Build small recharge ponds against villages with meters on both ends. Publish the balance like a bank statement. Liters stored, liters withdrawn, triggers that stop the pump when the line goes red. All of that sounds like policy. It's also a social contract. People don't swap crops or skip irrigations on faith. Compensation must clear fast, not next quarter. Pay households to accept cuts that save a basin, cash for yield loss, vouchers for efficient kit, guarantees that tanker queues shrink when thresholds hit. Promise baseline water per person and make it visible. Meters at the fence, dashboards in the clinic, text alerts in Uzbek, Turkmen, Karakalpak, Kyrgyz, Tajik, and Dari. If you ask for trust, show your numbers. Community monitoring isn't a slogan, it's leverage. Train co-ops to log pump hours, sample drains, and stream gauge heights. Give them a number to call when a valve misses its mark, and the authority to trigger a rule. Put youth on stipend to read peer marks and match them against the dashboard. If the data disagrees, the default is protection. Flows ratchet down, drains open, audits start. Managed retreat is the line nobody wants to write. Retire the deadest fields with honor. Buy out plots that glitter white 3 Julys in a row. Move people once, not thrice, and move them better. Houses where jobs live, clinics tied to drought cycles, schools that teach the gauges their parents used to ignore. Fund exits with green bonds keyed to hydrology triggers. When a drain hits target salinity for a season, coupon steps down. When a canal keeps minimum flows through August, premium tightens. Finance will follow clear rules faster than it'll heed speeches. This is time bartering, not magic. Every retrofit trades exposure for resilience. Every crop shift trades romance for survival. Every retreat trades pride for permanence. Do it before a crisis and you choose your pace. Do it after and the river chooses for you. In a thin century, the pressure valves that work are the ones you can see, measure, and enforce in heat, not the ones you admire in a plan. The Qosh Tepa decision tree, best worst case paths. Lay the map on the table and pick a fork. The canal exists. The only question left is whether governance will catch it, measure it, and bind it, or whether the trench writes the rules by flowing first. Best case starts small and fastens itself to meters. Kabul phases intake in steps tied to audited gauges at the head and along the main line. Every new reach opens only after flow losses are measured, seepage lined where needed, and salinity at designated drains downstream stays within bands for a full season. A trilateral team, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, with an independent auditor publishes hourly data, intake rate, losses by reach, return flows, and drain salinity. Release windows are harmonized with downstream sowing, and intake throttles automatically during late-season low flow. Emergency drought playbooks sit pre-signed. A flow floor at Kirki triggers a staged cut at Qosh Tepa within hours, not weeks. On farms, pilot plots lead, not rhetoric. Drip and gated pipes arrive with filters and maintenance budgets, not just brochures. Crop mixes lean towards cereals and short-season staples that forgive thin pulses. A joint silt plan keeps the intake alive, sluice cycles, settling basins, and a sediment budget that doesn't pretend the Amu is clean. Politics frames the project as stability, not conquest. A fund flows upstream, cash for measured restraint and efficiency, not lump sum promises, paid by lower insurance premiums and cheaper capital downstream because markets trust gauges more than pressers. Outcome: new hectares within hydrologic limits, a flatter volatility curve, and fewer midnight valves. Downstream salinity rises less, drains keep pace, and the delta's capillaries survive another thin century's shove. Bonds price softer, offtakes write smaller flex bands, a corridor breathes. Medium case blurs the edges. Afghanistan builds in big bites, meters exist but calibration slips. Audits are seasonal and political calendars crowd technical ones. Some intake lining, some field efficiency, patchy training. Joint scheduling exists on paper, but drought triggers wobble under pressure. Farmers see creeping salinity, pumps multiply. Downstream, releases come late and muddy more often. Canal managers develop the habit of temporary rationing. Crop switches appear mid-rotation. Gins run short 1 year, mills the next. Insurance rides herd with higher deductibles. Lenders add hydrology covenants that bite on bad weeks. Conflicts stay local, gate disputes, night pumping, border weir theatrics, without tipping into crisis. Everyone pays the anxiety tax in diesel, discounts, and missed windows. The map holds thinner. Worst case moves at speed and hides the meters. Intake jumps from pilot to mainline in a season. Silt management is an afterthought,